What stories of instant karma do you have? I worked at the same company for over 6 years. I was a loyal, good employee with a perfect track record. Over the 6 years, I've only called in sick maybe twice, had the best results, the least amount of errors on paperwork in the whole region, and quite possibly the whole country. My new boss decided that that wasn't enough. He minimized my hours, they get a bonus to keep labor low, expanded my workload, and never had anything nice to say. He seemed to think ruling with an iron fist is the way to go about this. Even after all this, I'm the one who kept his head above water, fixing his errors along the way. So today, I resigned my position with immediate effect, which in terms canceled his vacation plans for next week. On top of that, there was no one to fill my position. As soon as I mouthed the words, I quit, you could see the terror in his eyes. He realized how screwed he was without me and tried to do whatever he could to keep me for at least another week. I've never felt such a sense of instant karma as today. I never meant to cancel his vacation, but I wasn't going to put his needs before mine. I have bills to pay. I'd feel bad about it if he wasn't such a schmuck, but he's a schmuck. Oof, his vacation now probably spent frantically Googling how to do my former employee's job and why did I think I could manage people? Story 2. I was working with this complete witch at the sandwich shop where I work. She was 17, I was 18. I was telling a coworker about how my boyfriend had proposed to me, and Witch comes up behind me and says, I bet he only proposed because the protection broke. It caused me to burst into tears because I'd also just recently found out there was only a 2% chance that I could have kids, and I was still very sensitive about it. After coming out of the supply room, I went in there to cry. I asked her to come out the back door with me so I could have a word with her. I didn't want customers to hear us because we likely would have ended up yelling. Anyway, I told her to keep her nose in her own business and blah blah blah. She decided to slap me pretty hard too. I didn't hit her back because we were directly in front of a camera, so I went inside and called my boss. He had seen it on the live feed at home and had recorded it. He was already on his way. He came in and dragged her out the back and fired her. Last I heard, she was unemployed, pregnant, and stuck with some useless schmuck. Story 3. I worked at a John Deere dealership fresh out of high school for my first job. I was a salesman. My GM and I had many fights over my numbers, which were number 3 out of 8, which isn't bad, but he found out I was selling customers what they needed to do their work rather than something that would do the job but be $10,000 more, and they didn't need the other features or uses for the equipment. Well, last day, I walk in and close a deal on a combine for a farmer who was friends with my grandpa, so I gave him $5K off of a $350K combine. Profit margin is about $40K. My boss calls him into his office and has a heyday about what I had just done for a repeat customer. I told him where I would like to drive a combine and left. All my former customers stopped buying from there, and the instant part, everyone else quit that day too. Not a single salesman left standing. Story 4. 2 regions of my company merged into one. The manager of the other region was a complete schmuck. He was about 5'2" and walked around like he had something to prove. He treated all my employees like garbage and made them feel as though the reason they were choosing the other side over ours was because of the quality of work, when in reality, they got tax breaks in the other state. Our numbers were far better in every category, but their labor was cheaper, and that is what mattered to the company. They gave my employees 4 months' notice. At first, they all thought it was a good thing so they could get paid while looking for another job. Nope. He made their lives absolutely miserable. He doubled their quota much higher than his own region, cut commissions down by 40%, and made weekly visits, chewing me and the other sales manager out for not hitting the new goals, and that there was absolutely no excuse. 1 month, the second to last month, we hit the new goal, not for him, to get our employees paid finally, and then he reamed us out because of the amount of vacation time used. Even after explaining employees needed days off because they were interviewing other places, since we are laying them off and that I would not deny anyone time if they have it available, he tried getting me fired for this, but I had too many friends. Well, here is how the karma comes into play. I'd worked closely with some corporate folks over the 2 years I was there. They found out my region was being shut down and thought I would make a great fit in the corporate office to be in charge of operations over the Midwest region. I kept it quiet. I didn't make any mention of it until I showed up at his office with a clipboard and a laptop. You should have seen the confusion in his eyes. Him, are you visiting or something? Me, yeah, you could say that. Him, well, I need to make sure security knows you're here. Me, oh, they know. I just had to show them my badge. I whip out my badge and show him my picture in front of the red, white, and blue flag. Only people that have a photo in front of a red, white, and blue flag are corporate employees. His bum was mine and his face showed sheer terror behind his twitching lips. I was fair to his employees, but boy, did I report every rude incident that went down there. His lack of cooperation, his condescending demeanor towards his own employees. It only took a few weeks for him to pack up boxes. Apparently, employees had been complaining for a long time, and it only took a little corporate push to get him out. Most satisfying moment in my working career ever. Story 5. My stepdad is a driving instructor. I went to get my license pretty late, 22. One day, he was giving me a lesson, and we were going over one of the possible courses that the test takes. While we're driving down a street in the suburbs, a guy is tailgating the crap out of me. Really gangster looking guy, sideways hat and all. Every time I come to a stop sign, I do a full stop, obviously, and he throws his hands in the air and yells crap. It's starting to stress me out, but my stepdad says, "Don't worry about it, watch this." As we're going down the street, he says, "Okay, now in about 50 feet, I want you to start slowing down a little bit, and right when you are in front of that school zone, pull over to the right." So I do it. Right after I pull over, the guy who is right angry at me now takes off like a bullet. And about 5 seconds later, a cop steps out from behind a tree and waves him over for going probably double the speed limit in a school zone. We laughed hard. Story 6. I worked at a Kmart in high school. It was a small store, so I worked on everything, electronics, stocking, cashier, you name it, I did it. I asked a woman and her son, about 12 or 13, if they needed help finding anything as I was out on the floor, and the kid immediately witches me out for annoying him. I ignore it and go about my business. Right after that, I get called to checkouts. As I'm working there, here comes a pair. The kid has gone all back out in the electronics area with some EA sports titles and a GTA game. I'm checking them out when the age prompt comes up for the M-rated game. I decided to take a chance. I flipped the game over and informed the mother that this game has been rated M for the following reasons, and I read the list off the back of the case. There is an awkward silence, then she angrily informs me that the son said it was only a little violent. Kid wasn't able to get anything that day. Story 7. I was flying cross country on a space available ticket and ended up having a layover in Chicago. I was walking around trying to find a restaurant close to my hotel, and I passed this dude on the street begging for some money to buy something to eat. Now, I'm used to seeing people with a cardboard sign or whatnot, but actually approaching people was pretty new to me. I thought to myself, man, this guy is probably just looking for substance money, and I'm going to call his bluff. So I walk up to him and say, "Tell you what, I won't give you any money, but I'm on my way to get a bite to eat, and if you want, you can come with me, and I'll get you whatever you want." I was feeling pretty arrogant and figured he would turn me down with some excuse. Absolutely. I was not expecting this. So he picks up his stuff and starts walking with me, and we settle on some Ruby Tuesday or Applebee's-ish place. He says he can't decide between a big steak or ribs, and I wave him off with my hand and tell him I have no problem buying him both. As we eat, he pulls out the biggest weapon I've ever seen in person. I'm talking like Crocodile Dundee size. He puts it on the table and says to me, "I can't tell you how freaking hungry I was. Everybody was passing me on the street. Some of them would just glare or ignore me. Some would talk crap or toss in their 2 cents because I just wanted substances." I told myself the next guy who had something clever to say to me was getting harmed. I was friggin' frozen. Conversation eventually moved on and we both finished our dinners. And I talked him into dessert. In the process, I told him I was extremely interested in his weapon and was in the market for one, and I offered him $250 for it. He was ecstatic and sold it to me. I just figured that dude didn't really need a weapon on him like that, and he could use the money. I gave it to a cop and said I found it on the street. Maybe some life was saved, who knows? Life taught me a few lessons that night. Don't judge, people aren't always who you think they are, and be nice. Story 8. I tried to explain to my company how they were breaking the law with one of their procedures. They didn't listen and said somebody up the line would have caught it. Later, illegally fired me whilst I was on family and medical leave. Was statistically at least their best employee at my position out of 500 people. They got fined $250K for the violation I brought up several times. I'm still unemployed, but I go hiking all day and I love my life. Have enough saved up to last me until I do find work. Screw 'em. Story 9. Was working a job where I was doing 90 hours a week but only getting paid for 40 to 45. Boss blew up on me over the phone, so I quit effectively at the end of the day. I finished up all of my work and he tried to sweet talk me into staying, but I held strong. Turns out he had to work 18 hours a day for the next 2 weeks trying to find a replacement. Yikes. His 18-hour days, probably fueled by nothing but lukewarm coffee and the bitter taste of regret. Ah, the breakfast of champions or desperate bosses. Story 10. It isn't a job-related story, but my little sister's friend was being a real witch to me, following me around, mocking everything I said, making rude commentary on everything I did. I told her she shouldn't do things like that to someone older than her because it could have dire consequences. Anyhow, they conned me into playing hide and seek with them, and the rules were to stay in the house. I searched high and low for that little crap, and I couldn't find her anywhere. My sister had no clue either, and neither of us heard the doors open, so we didn't think she could be out there. Turns out the kid decided to say, screw the rules and go outside. Well, she hid in the back of my mom's truck. It was a camper shell that can be locked from the outside. I guess someone saw it open and locked it while the kid was hiding inside. She ended up whizzing her pants. I volunteered to unlock it, and I took my sweet time staring at her with this grin. It was great. Story 11. As the low man on the totem pole, I got all of the grunt labor and random tasks that required working on weekends and such. As a master engineer working in a 9-to-5 job, being paid less than a pizza delivery driver, then my boss decided that I no longer got comp time, leave early or whatever to get back some of the time spent working on weekends, because I was salaried and it was part of the job. So when I quit to go get my PhD, they realized I hadn't used any vacation time. The ultra penny pincher had to write me a check for 2 extra months worth of pay as I walked out the door. Story 12. I'm an IT consultant and have a rep of being really competent with Microsoft Exchange Server. A couple of years ago, I bid on but did not get a project to upgrade an Exchange 2003 environment to Exchange 2010. Multiple servers, multiple sites, and right up my alley. The firm that won the bid did so by pricing it extremely low, about 40% below my price, which was on the low end to begin with. Totally unrealistic pricing, but they thought they could pull it off with their people. Their people were good generalists, but didn't have a handle on Exchange 2010. I told the customer who I'd done work for before, and who I'd had a good relationship with, that it was not going to end well for them. They took it as sour grapes on my part. Fair enough. I had plenty of other things to do anyway, so I just moved on. 2 weeks after they started the implementation phase of the job, the other consulting firm augured in. The entire email system stopped working, no mail coming in or out, no mail flowing between any of the Exchange servers, everything just down in the water. I found this out when I got a call late one evening at my home from the other consulting company begging me to pull them out of the fire. I told them, no thanks. An hour later, the owner of the other firm is at my front door trying to convince me to help them for the sake of the customer. This is well after dark and the conversation does not go well. He ends up screaming at me and I slam the door, then call the cops because I'm tired and afraid that I'll do something stupid if I continue to interact with the guy. Cops come, he loses it, they arrest him for disorderly conduct, and I have his damn car blocking mine in my driveway. I have it towed off. I had to pay for the privilege, too. He spends the next 24 hours in jail, about average for getting through the Dallas County Jail, I'm told. The customer called me the following day, and I again declined to fix the mess. By this time, I decided I didn't want any of that crap on me, period. The customer ends up getting Microsoft services in to fix everything, cost them about 5 times what I was going to charge, by the way. The customer sues the other consulting firm, which promptly files for bankruptcy, closes its doors rather than deal with the lawsuit. I don't know if this was instant karma or not, but it's the first time I've had the opportunity to tell this story on Reddit. Story 13. I worked as a database administrator for a community center for one summer in university. Basically, I created a database for them to track who was donating to them and how much they were donating, and who was volunteering at the center and for how many hours. Very simple work, and despite being the youngest person on staff by about 25 to 30 years, I got along well with all of my coworkers, except for my immediate boss, who was a total witch. The next spring, I was applying for jobs and emailed my old boss to ask for a letter of recommendation. Much to my surprise, she told me that she didn't write recommendation letters out of principle. I was pretty mad about it because I was finding it very difficult to find a position, and not being able to count on my most recent employer for a reference was a definite blemish on my resume. However, in spite of this, I managed to land a decent job. Lo and behold, my old boss emails me on day one of my new job begging me to come in because she had somehow ignored all the warnings in the user documentation I wrote and moved some files around, rendering it impossible for her to access the database. She asked if I would come in, and I emailed her back and told her I already had a job and couldn't do it out of principle, effectively rendering my entire summer at the center a waste of time from their perspective. Story 14. I was targeted for firing. Had nothing to do with my performance, everything to do with my manager's manager that took a dislike to me. I walked the line of perfection for about a month until I found another job. I handed in my 2 weeks' notice. That was victory number 1. I stole about a half a dozen of their employees and got them hired into my new company. That was victory number 2. Yes, Redditors sometimes being in a right to work state works for the little guy. Non compete clauses are almost completely unenforceable. I'd like to think that victory number 3 was the 30 or 40 employees they lost in the following year, but I can't claim direct responsibility for that. Thing is, when you have employees with high demand skills like software engineering, you better treat them right. Story 15. When I was a teenager, I was in a van with a bunch of my friends, all spiked out. We stopped for a gas at a place on a busy intersection. One of my friends points out some action happening in a car parked next to the street and says, "He's hurting the crap out of her." Sure enough, some schmuck is bouncing his girlfriend. Now, we were no innocent teenagers, and this van was our mailbox baseball mobile. We grabbed our bats and prepared to intervene, but just as we were getting out, the girl grabs the keys out of the guy's ignition and throws them into the street. I can see the rest in slow motion, clear as day, even though it happened more than 20 years ago. The guy races out of the car in a huff, runs into the street, bends to pick up his keys. He gets back up, points at the car, and starts to yell something, his face red with rage. Just then, a little sports sedan turns the corner at speed and hits him. Guy does a flip over the car and falls. Girlfriend runs to him, crying in remorse. As I said, we were spiked, carrying substances and bats, a bunch of punk rock kids. We were in no way prepared to stick around and talk to the cops, so this was the last I knew of things until a few years later. One night, back from college on winter break, I was telling this story at a party. A girl looks at me funny, starts asking me date and location questions. She was really freaking out. Turns out she was the driver that hit the schmuck, only she didn't know he was a schmuck. No one at the scene, including the girlfriend, said anything about the cruelty. The driver had felt guilty for years about running down some innocent guy that just happened to be standing in the road, crippling him for life. My chance retelling of the story took a huge burden off of her. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 16. Worked for a small lottery parlor chain for the better part of a year back around 2008. It was a single employee operation, so I worked a 10-hour shift with no breaks for lunch. All in all, it wasn't a bad job and had good tips. One day, out of the blue, the region manager calls me into the store and tells me that I'm suspended. No warning whatsoever. I asked her why, and she flat out told me that I'm frightening away the patrons because of my gender. I'm gay. The next day, she calls me to say that I'm no longer needed. I tried for a lawsuit, but it was he said, she said kind of thing. Flash forward to last month, I get a call from a lawyer asking if I want to take part in a class action lawsuit against this company for discrimination and unfair wage compensation practices. I told them my story, and now I'm a class representative for the case, so I'm ready for this court case. Story 17. When I was a kid, I was the youngest of all the kids on my block. The other kids, including my sister, would have fun tormenting me. They would try to exclude me from things on the basis of, you have to be X years old to do it. The worst of them was Marcus, who would always be a complete butthead. One day, Marcus and I, along with some of the other kids, went to a nearby school to ride around on our scooters. Oh yeah. Marcus convinced me that to be cool, I had to jump down a flight of 5 stairs. I succeeded, but broke my scooter in the process. As the kids rode off, laughing at me for not being able to join them, Marcus's front wheel caught in a hole in the concrete. He flew over the handlebars straight into a flagpole. I broke my scooter, he broke his face. Story 18. My fiance and I were workers at a Pizza Hut. She was a waitress and I was a cook. I had worked for NPC for 5 years and she worked for them for 2. Anyway, we were probably the best employees they had and knew what we were doing. Nevertheless, in the food business, managers come and go, some better than others. So we were both scheduled for a ridiculous shift of about 10.5 hours in that crap hole from open to 8 that night. We would have been the only 2 employees there in our respected positions until 5. Keep in mind, this was a Sunday morning in the Bible Belt and a buffet day. So both she and I had a crap ton of work to do. On top of that, they had steamed the carpets the night before and never set the tables and chairs back up in the lobby. We both only had a couple of hours to do our opening stuff, which every minute counts. So what happens, our freaking stupid manager goes and gets breakfast, sits in a booth, and watches my fiance and me put the lobby together, bust our backs to do our opening crap because we ran short of time. My fiance comes to me in tears saying she just wants to leave because this day was just completely screwed. So what do? We wait, buffet coming out of the oven and at least a dozen people walking in. We both just say, screw it, and leave, leaving him by himself to manage that crap like he should. Frickin' schmuck just sat in the office to let us do all of the work. Do I feel bad? No, that was swift justice. Story 19. I was working 60-hour weeks, including being on call 24/7 on weekends for $12,000 a year. One night, I was at work alone until about 11 p.m. and finally decided, screw it. I locked up, threw my keys through the mail slot, wrote a resignation email, and turned my phone off. I woke up late the next morning to like 10 calls, texts, and emails from my now ex boss begging me to come back. So I leisurely went back to pack up my stuff and give him a list of everything he still owed me. It was so cheap, he made me pay for supplies on my own dime and expense it at the end of the month. A couple of months later, after my remaining coworkers had full on nervous breakdowns from sharing my workload and left the state for other jobs, it was down to one employee and had to move from his office in an awesome location in an industry and city where image is everything to one of those sketchy office parks like 30 miles north where most of the companies are, the ones that sell makeup or knives door to door. Story 20. I worked selling shoes for 2 years on a weekend-only basis during school at a national chain. Never offered a raise, never offered to open the store, never given any recognition. When I asked for some more responsibilities, I was told I was unimportant as two new outside managers were coming in. One managed a section of PetSmart, the other had no prior experience. I put in my 2 weeks' notice. Both people came in on my last day, so I showed them everything I learned and all the small quirks of the inventory that we had. Both quit within a week, and the store closed within 4 months. Story 21. My family immigrated from Mexico, and my dad was the top engineer at a company there. He could complete tasks that took others 4 hours in just 2. He was exceptionally skilled, and everyone knew it. Around the time I was 5, he was transferred to the United States to work in a larger factory with more complex machinery. The company unfortunately exploited my dad. They overworked him, paid him for only half of his hours, and his boss even fired him upon learning that my dad was being considered for a promotion over him. He stayed with the company only because of his work visa. Essentially, the company held our family hostage. They threatened to send us back to Mexico, leaving him alone, and he felt he had no choice but to endure it. After he was fired, another branch of the same company discovered his situation and rehired him in Texas, where he faced the same mistreatment. However, this time my dad secretly began searching for a new job. By then, my family had obtained green cards, granting us residency, and the company no longer had power over us. The moment he found a significantly better job, he quit and he timed his departure perfectly. Their machine, which produced complex oil rig cables, had broken down, and replacing it would have cost the company between $750,000 and $1 million. For his own amusement, my dad asked a friend who still worked there for some blueprints. He quickly identified the problem and waited to see how the company would handle it. They ended up replacing a part worth thousands of dollars only for it to break down again. My dad was laughing the whole time because he had designed the machine and knew it was a simple but crucial component that would have cost only about $100 to replace. The company didn't figure it out until they had spent over $200,000 on the machine. Story 22. So bear with me, this story is as instant karma can get. I go to New York City about once a year to visit family, and while there, I always crave the grandma's Sicilian pizza. The best slice in the city is served near my cousin's place. Well, it's New York, and naturally the joint is crowded as hell. Across from the register, you can grab drinks, and paying for them basically comes down to the honor system. The cashier can see you take a drink, but 90% of the time is occupied with a customer. I've never really stolen before, but my cousin just nonchalantly took a drink and nobody said a word. I do love me some peach Snapple, so I got greedy and took 2 of them. I paid for the food and we were on our way out. I was on an admittedly silly adrenaline rush. Did I mention my craving for the pizza was so large that I got an entire pizza instead of just 1 or 2 slices? Yep, an entire pie for myself. So as we were walking back to the subway station, I trip on the curb and fall. I land on the pizza with my stomach covering my clothes in sauce. Both Snapples shatter and the glass lodges itself in knuckles, palms, and legs. The brand new $60 jeans I purchased the day before at Express got ripped by the glass and stained by my mess. Despite cleaning the wounds properly, the ones on my hand became infected that night. Suffice to say, I haven't stolen since. Story 23. I was trying to sell my Appleseed biodiesel processor. One guy came by who seemed genuinely interested. He said he would pay me $100 to give a demonstration of the whole process. Apparently, he was some big shot with a garage and a fleet of heavy equipment. I demoed the first 90% of the process and explained the rest. Days, weeks go by, and I haven't seen my $100 or the guy. I found out he had tried to make his own processor and failed epically. He ruined 2 very expensive dump trucks. They are still sitting behind his house. Story 24. Worked for a company that moved out over the weekend because they were locking us out that Monday. Yep, no movers. Moved into a new office, and being an internet company, it was important the internet worked. Ever try to get someone out on a weekend from the phone company, the provider for our T1? Got everything hooked up, and gosh, no internet. So he called me in on Sunday to talk to tech support. I'm a family man and we had a very nice dinner planned, but no, work was more important to my boss. Told him, okay, but he need to meet me at the office. I did the tech support call and still no boss. Called him again and told him I really needed him in the office. I handed him my key, the list of passwords to the server wrapped in my resignation letter. Told him I had a family and being pulled away from Easter Sunday dinner to talk to tech support to only have them confirm what I told him Friday and Saturday was the last straw. Told him that I was sure he could find another Java, PHP, Linux admin on short notice or he could go figure it out himself. Story 25. This kid used to mess with me while we all waited for class to start in middle school. He'd grab up my stuff, particularly the trumpet I played for this class, make fun of me, etc. We were all bored, so it must have been to spend time. Anyway, I had enough of his BS, so I swung the case for my trumpet at his head. I didn't think it hit him that hard, but I heard later he went into his class crying. They made us go into some kind of mediation thing, but it was too late. I got my revenge and he didn't want to live it down. So we basically never talked to each other again. Like, he went crying? Did he think the trumpet case was a piñata filled with, emotional support? Story 26. At my last job, I had a new senior manager hired to run my division in our sister division. After working with him for 6 months, I had reached my breaking point. He would call at 5:01 to see if I was still there. He would email me at 1 a.m. I had a company BlackBerry, asking for amendments to his morning meetings presentations regarding my division. He would ask my receptionist to take notes regarding the ongoings in my office. 3 of us shared an office. He was down the hall. He was the worst boss I've ever worked for, but the job market was tight and this paid the bills. The final straw came when I returned from a week off. He approached me and asked why I was quitting. I hadn't submitted notice nor notified anyone I was. I told him I wasn't and that he'd be the first to know if I did. He called me a liar and walked away. I sent him an email that afternoon tendering my resignation with 3 weeks' notice. In my exit interview, I told the HR team everything, and I mean everything, about the crap he pulled. 4 weeks later, he was fired, along with my receptionist. Story 27. I worked at a shoe store a while back. When I applied, I really wanted to be a sales associate, but the manager told me she only had room for a stock guy for the time being, and then she could transfer me to sales when she had an opening. Being a stock guy in a shoe store in a mall sucked. You have to stack the shoes way high up on rolling stacks in a complicated alphabetical numeric sequence based on style, color, and size. When new shipments come in, you have to shift all the shoes on all the racks over, just enough so you have space for the new styles. It takes a ridiculous amount of planning, foresight, and even physical endurance to climb up ladders with big boxes of boots and stack them in order all day long. Anyway, I inquired a few times as to how that sales position looked since I had seen a few salespeople quit after I started to work. She kept saying, no, sorry, no room for a new sales guy yet. One particularly rough afternoon while I was working, she actually came back into the stockroom to interview a new candidate for a sales position right in front of me. So I climbed down from the rolling racks, put the boxes away, and said, I thought you didn't have room for a sales associate right now. I quit. Let this girl do stock. Story 28. Pulling up in an empty left turn lane at a 4-way intersection during morning rush hour traffic at a red light, some schmuck in a SUV in the going straight lane decides to veer left and execute a 3-point turn and turn around. I slammed on my brakes and avoided the collision and mouthed some choice words at him while he gave me a dumb blank look. 2 seconds later, however, an unmarked car pulled out of the straight lane behind me and did the same turn maneuver, blue lights flashing. First time I've ever had a cop in the right place in that situation was great. Story 29. Not job related, but still fun. When I was fresh out of high school and living with my buddy Brett, we wound up living month to month without a lease at a low middle end apartment complex. The rent wasn't too bad, but me and Brett were 19 and had many more priorities other than rent and bills, so we got a coworker of Brett's to move in with us. Long story short, the guy turned out to be a total schmuck. After a couple of months of putting up with his crap, we had a huge fight where he punched a hole in the wall and broke my computer. So the next morning, as soon as the apartment complex office opened, me and my buddy Brett went down and signed a lease for the apartment, becoming the only 2 legal occupants. Then we called the cops and had them kick the schmuck out for trespassing. Cops woke the schmuck and his scammy girlfriend up out of a second sleep to tell them they had to leave. Story 30. I worked for this engineering company where it was common to work 50 to 70-hour work weeks with no overtime. And if you even asked for your comp time, they acted like you were pulling teeth out of their nose hole. I got assigned to this one project, and my project manager was a complete idiot. He never put his foot down with the customer, and I ended up having to redraw multiple design packages at least 6 times each. I worked a 4-month span with only 4 days off, Monday to Friday, 14 to 15-hour days. Saturday was a 12-hour day, and Sundays were quote unquote light with 8-hour days. My project manager only knew how to design water filtration systems and never helped me once during the entire project, being that it was an automotive project. Schmuck even went on vacation for 2 weeks while I worked over this project. Towards the end of the project, after all the equipment was installed, they asked me to redraw the entire project from scratch to reflect the current state. This would have been fine if they gave me a proper amount of time to perform this task, like 3 to 4 months, rather than the 30 days they told me to have it done by. I told them to go screw themselves and quit, leaving my hapless manager to pick up the pieces on a project he knew nothing about because he was too busy calling me an idiot. Last I heard, he was put at the bottom of the project totem pole and was never assigned a job worth more than 50K again. Story 31. Everyone is talking about I quit and is screwed over the boss stories. I have one, I suppose. I basically started a cascade of quits that led to the manager being fired. When I worked for CVS, my first manager was great. I was working part-time, 15 hours a week, and going to college. I didn't really need the extra money because of scholarships. That manager moved to a bigger store and the next guy came in. Then one worker quit. They were also part-time. My hours suddenly doubled. I was working about 30 hours a week. After about 2 months of, I'll fix it, yeah, next week it'll get better, and my personal favorite, can you work with me? I realized my boss didn't give a crap. I wasn't the only one. Me and some of the other workers realized that none of us were happy, and a lot of us wanted to quit for the same reasons. Boss was overscheduling the entire store and refused to hire anyone else, but we were just waiting for the right moment. I realized there was a big Halloween party that me and my neighbors were throwing in about 2 weeks, so no time like the present. I put in my 2 weeks, zero craps given. I actually ended up being sick as heck my last day, which turned out sorta nice. I called in and said I felt like crap and didn't want to go in. Ran into one of the people that worked at the store about a month later. Apparently, the day after I quit, they lost a shift supervisor, one of the other clerks, a pharmacy tech, the lead photo supervisor, and a pharmacist. If you don't know, in a place like CVS, pharmacists are worth their weight in gold and hard as heck to hire. Apparently, his higher-ups didn't like that, so the manager got the boot. I like to think that I was the pebble that started the avalanche. Story 32. I was dating this awful girl for a while because, I was stupid. She had a temper and was always flying off the handle. One of those people who was never happy, complains about everything. We had a fight that morning about her irrational temper. Later that day, I called her to tell her I had to work late. She freaks out and punches the wall as soon as our conversation ended. Turns out she punched a part of the wall that was solid behind the drywall in her hand. She was promptly dumped. Story 33. Gonna be buried in not instant karma, but delicious nonetheless. When I was a tyke, my parents went through a mighty nasty divorce, so it was decided I should go through counseling to help me deal with it. Anyhow, my mom managed to anger my counselor, who decided to contact a social worker. Long story short, she made up a crap ton of lies by twisting the words of a 5-year-old, like, my mom really loves animals, to my mother loves the animals more than me. And from these lies, she had my custody moved to my dad. Not so evil? Immediately after getting my dad custody, she started lying about how he was a bad fit as well and cruel and I should be put in a home. Why did she do this? Social workers get a huge tax break or pay bonus or something or other for every child they save from a cruel home. So she was trying to milk my case to the point of using me as a bonus. Luckily, my family actually worked together to keep me around and the witch didn't get away with it. Lo and behold, 3 years later, the witch tried it again. But this time, the family she screwed with didn't take it too kindly. They got all sorts of evidence against her and the press interviewed other families she had recently worked with and it was found she falsified all sorts of crap. She was literally chased out of the courtroom, lost her license, and got the crap sued out of her by a lot of families. Story 34. I was an assistant manager at a GameStop a while back. While I got fired, I was happy with it and my boss was angry. Basically, I was the youngest assistant manager in the state and ran my store. Our district manager knew this because my store was also his office. On top of that, my store manager would brag to my district manager that I ran the store for him. I hated my store manager. He didn't do crap all day while I caught the flack for his crap. So after I got fired, the man starts stressing out. He has a history of health issues due to the stress. He has a seizure and quits. For the next 6 months, he's calling me asking if I could go work under him at these oddball jobs he's found. And if any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.